started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here on this rainy January evening. Hope everybody's somewhere warm and cozy. We're really glad that you could all be here tonight for our program, Displacement During COVID, what's happening 1 year after the eviction and foreclosure moratoriums are lifted. My name is Will Greenberg. I am the Development and Communications Coordinator at Brooklyn Legal Services Corporation A. You may be familiar with Brooklyn A already, or you may be just getting introduced to us for the first time tonight. So just for a little background, we are a legal service provider. We've been around for more than 50 years, and we now serve clients throughout all 5 New York City boroughs from our home offices in Williamsburg and Bed-Stuy. We have 3 main program areas: preserving affordable housing, community and economic development, and consumer and economic advocacy. And within that, we now have a new domestic violence program. We have members of each of our core programs speaking tonight, so I will leave it to them to give a little more in-depth introduction to their respective programs. But in general, Brooklyn A provides innovative, collaborative, neighborhood-based representation and advocacy that advances social and economic justice and opportunity. The core theme of our high-quality, low-barrier legal services is to support individuals, families, and small businesses so that they can thrive and stay rooted in their communities and their neighborhoods despite the pressures of gentrification and displacement. So tonight we're going to be hearing from Hale, a staff attorney in preserving affordable housing, Alex Grzebyk, who is a staff attorney in community and economic development, Alex Knipenberg, who is a staff attorney, senior staff attorney in consumer and economic advocacy, and Serena Sankofa, program director in consumer and economic advocacy. We have a wide-ranging program for you. We're really excited to dig into it tonight. Most of what we'll be covering will be related to the stress and the crisis of COVID, and particularly focusing on the last year and the city and state's emergency response to the crises. And we'll get into also some trends that we've been seeing from our clients that aren't necessarily related to COVID, but things that we think are really valuable to share and foster discussion here. So because of that, we got a wide-ranging program. I'm sure there'll be questions. We ask that you hold them until the end. We'll have a Q&A session. And when we get there, you can ask your questions in the chat, or you can use the Zoom hand raise function, and we will be able to unmute you so you can ask your question verbally. So we want to start off our program by giving some context to the various crises we've been dealing with and the struggles that our clients have been facing and how Brooklyn A has been responding to it. And for that, we will turn it over to our executive director, Jessica Rose.
Thank you, Will. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening. As Will mentioned, it's been a challenging almost 3 years since the COVID pandemic hit the world and New York City. Tonight's program will focus on the last calendar year, but we wanted to first review some of the many challenges our city has faced. At least 2.6 million confirmed cases in New York City, likely more from COVID-19. More than 206,000 hospitalizations and more than 44,000 deaths confirmed and probable. Staggering numbers. Unemployment peaked at more than 20% in May of 2020, 1 in 5 New York City residents. 1 year in, New York City had the most job losses of any large US city. And as of December 22, New York City unemployment is still 2.4% higher than the national average. The pandemic, as with most crises, did not affect all New Yorkers the same and disproportionately impacted the most vulnerable amongst us. Black and Latinx New York residents experienced roughly double the fatality rate of white New York City residents. An Association of Neighborhood Housing Developers report found that from the start of the pandemic through January 2022, all but one majority white zip code in the city had an eviction filing rate below 5 evictions per 100 renter households. Conversely, for over 1/3 of majority person of color zip codes had a rate of 5 per 100 households. Statistics from the Center for New York City Neighborhoods reported that majority Black zip codes had 4 times the rate of mortgage delinquency compared to majority white zip codes in fall 2021. This reflects not only the disparate impact of COVID, but historical and current systemic racial implications. COVID is, of course, still with us, but we now also find ourselves in the midst of a housing crisis that has reached historic numbers. Rent prices hit a reported all-time high in June 2022 at $3,500 average across the city. Homeless shelter population reached an all-time high in October, according to the Coalition for Homeless. Rising mortgage interest rates have kept more people in the rental market. And the increase in immigrants, which we all are well aware of, are needing incredible resources and support. But we are proud to say, in the midst of these incredible challenges, we continue to provide critical free legal services to thousands of New Yorkers. In fiscal year 2022, Brooklyn A worked on nearly 6,000 legal matters. We preserved home ownership for 334 families. We resolved almost 300 tax issues for low-income households and provided lease and contract assistance on 1,835 issues for 694 businesses, all of that citywide. And across Brooklyn, we prevented the displacement of 2,847 tenant households. For a little context on who Brooklyn A typically serves, you can see here on the slide that the majority of our clients identify as female, BIPOC, have an annual income of under $30,000 a year, and are over the age of 50 years old, meaning our work focuses on some of the most marginalized in the city, and we strive to center those communities in the work we do. Tonight's program will cover what our staff are hearing from our clients every day. We hope by identifying these trends and sharing them with potential clients, community partners, and city leaders joining us on this Zoom, that we can all work together to achieve greater justice for more New Yorkers in the coming year. With that, I'll turn to Zach Hale, one of the staff attorneys in our Preserving Affordable Housing program. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesse, and thank you to everybody for being here tonight. As Jesse has said, I am a staff attorney with Brooklyn A's Preserving Affordable Housing unit. We are the kind of dedicated tenant renter unit within the Brooklyn A structure, and we use a variety of approaches, in the courtroom, out of the courtroom, to help keep renters and families safe, to keep them in stable housing that is affordable to them. And as we know, there's a shortage of that across the country, across the city. And so when a family is in housing that works for them, that's in a community where they've lived for a long time, that they can afford, the Preserving Affordable Housing unit works with those families to make sure they can stay put for as long as they want to. So that also involves organizing to make sure that housing is safe. So there's healthy conditions in the housing, another big part of our work. We'll talk a little bit about the COVID impact on housing. As we all know, COVID is still ongoing, as Jesse acknowledged, and the impact on New York went so far beyond housing. And yet housing and home sits at the core of so many aspects of someone's life that all of the other impacts literally came home, right? So loss of employment and other family impacts affected how people could pay for their rent or whether they felt safe leaving their home. In recognition of that, the New York State and the New York City government passed some protections, made some efforts that would help renters to stay safe and to mitigate the spread as it could be impacted with housing issues. Some of those are here on the screen now. The Tenant Safe Harbor Act was the first widespread legislative action in the state. That was followed up with the COVID Emergency Eviction Foreclosure Prevention Act, which we call CEFPA. And both of those included these moratoriums, these pauses on evictions themselves, on eviction proceedings in court, to try to give people, stability in a very turbulent time, and also a little bit of relief, whether it be actual literal financial relief or just the relief, the peace of mind with not having to go to court in the midst of a deadly pandemic. So I'll talk a little bit more about the moratoriums. Unfortunately, these are primarily, I think this is our next slide, I think. These are primarily in the past now. We don't have these protections anymore, but they were one of the most rapid responses from our government. And the courts themselves at the administrative level in March 2020, they were postponing, continuing with administrative stays, and keeping people out of court and stopping issuing eviction warrants in most cases, until just kind of a let's stop everything and see what's going on. And then the state and eventually the federal government stepped in with these other types of protections. Now, the New York protections not only stopped evictions themselves from happening legally, most evictions legally could not happen, at least in the early months of the pandemic, but they also stopped eviction cases from moving forward in many cases. So that's just going to court, going through the hearings and all of that, and the filings, which each stage has risks of, other complications in the case. So they just put that on hold in 2020. And then in 2021, they expanded it in some ways and retracted it in others. Eventually, about a month ago, or about a year ago, it was lifted. And in the time since then, we've seen, you can see here on the screen, 4,400 evictions in the past year, at least, and those are legal evictions coming through the courts with marshals. The unreported evictions are probably much more. And each court case that's being filed or that was on pause and is now reinvigorated is clogging up another piece of the kind of court resources. And that includes the judges' times, times in the courtroom, administrative times, and the attorneys, right? So Brooklyn A and other provider attorneys are just, overwhelmed with all of these cases that are coming, and the whole court system is overwhelmed with them as we move forward. Talk about next, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP, was another type of protection that came in 2021, and it had a moratorium type component. It had a pause on eviction cases, but most importantly, it provided money to tenants who had fallen behind on their rent for different reasons during COVID. And so, you can see here 26,000 tenants. Those are, many of them, families. So the actual, numbers of people that were helped by this program are massive. And the funding came in part from the federal government, in part from the state government. But what really matters is that it went directly to the, rental accounts of these individual tenants. It wasn't trickled through a lot of different administrative procedures. And that direct type of help impacts people directly. It was designed to, and it was effective. And what we saw was that thousands of court cases were able to be dismissed or resolved because the rental debt that was at the core of the case was satisfied. And that's incredible. It's not debt forgiveness, but it's an incredible way of addressing a lot of debt that had been built up, in many cases through no fault of any individual tenant. And it, stopped untold foreclosures as well, because the property owners who may have had otherwise trouble paying their other debts, it stopped that chain. So it was a very effective policy. Unfortunately, applications for the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, or ERAP, were closed just 5 days ago now. Hard to believe it was so recent. They're still processing old applications, but there's a lot of uncertainty moving forward. And that definitely leaves a gap in the protections and the assistance that are available for renters here in New York. There are still some protections available, and we'll get to those in just a second, but it's important to really emphasize, like I was saying, that these programs worked, right? I mean, we have right here, there is, you know, the districts, not just New York, but across the country, that paused evictions saw less of a spread of COVID. And think about, I mean, it's kind of intuitive why, right? I mean, people are being forced out of their homes in the middle of this raging pandemic, forced into unsafe conditions, living either in a shelter system that was overcrowded or with family, just increasing that exposure rate. And we already knew before COVID that displacement had multiplying effects on all kinds of other bad health outcomes. So, you know, exposure to unsafe housing, exposure to viruses and contagious diseases, but also trauma. I mean, the trauma of displacement on a family can be multi-generational. And so this is a public health intervention to pause evictions that is effective beyond just the COVID pandemic. And it's something policymakers hopefully are remembering moving forward. There are still some existing measures that have been put in place pre-pandemic at various stages that were there as a safety net for tenants. And then in 2019, also kind of some more aggressive tenant protections that have been really helpful for tenants who want to remain in their homes, who want to ensure that their homes and their communities are safe. So tenant advocates like us at Brooklyn A have an expanded toolkit to really fight for the people that we work alongside, right? I mean, so many of our clients are people that have been in the tenants movement in New York for a long time, and we are working alongside them to help enforce some of these laws that they helped in their activism get passed. So there are protections, there are funds available for some limited rent relief when people fall behind in rent. And so people should know about those through the HRA one-shot deal program. And there are so many other vouchers and subsidies that may be accessed by people. So that's something where Brooklyn A is a resource in the community for that. And people can reach out to our attorneys, to our staff for help navigating to benefit centers where you can get that help. Moving forward, as we look at, as the kind of fog clears somewhat from some of the worst moments of the pandemic, we're staring at other crises that predated the pandemic and ones that are being exacerbated by the pandemic's impact on our economy, for example, and our politics. And so, heat issues. We have heat season here in New York, as I'm sure everybody knows, where it gets so cold and your landlord's required to keep the heat up to a certain level. Those are, massively concentrated in the areas like where Brooklyn A works, as Jesse was pointing to earlier. Predominantly communities of color have a disproportionate level of heat violations, and other violations besides just heat. All kind of repair violations are concentrated in those neighborhoods. Those neighborhoods are also where speculative activity is at its highest, and there are ties between, research has been showing more and more that there are ties between the debt level that a portfolio or a building has on it and the amount of maintenance issues and violations that are in there, or the sale price, the speculative kind of boost in a sale price that a property gets, and the subsequent failures to do basic maintenance. So these things are tied, and they're in the communities where Brooklyn A works. We see it all the time, and it's catching on in terms of research and political action. So moving forward, we're looking at policy changes that are being proposed at the local, state, and federal level that address some of these issues. And I do want to circle back just to say it says here large investor portfolios. Yeah, I think people have this idea that so many renters, you may have had this experience in your own renting life. You have a nice small landlord, and Many people have that experience, but the average New York apartment is part of a portfolio that includes over 21 buildings, right? 21 separate buildings. That's hundreds of units in the average, the portfolio of an average New York apartment. And the tenants that live in a portfolio, in a building that's part of a big portfolio, 24% more likely to be evicted. And what I was saying more about the maintenance before, just to put some data on that, these highly leveraged, really debt burdened buildings, 3 times as many maintenance violations in those buildings. So this is a really concrete, measurable phenomenon when we talk about the impact of speculation and accumulation at this big scale. So that's something that, is the kind of systemic political issue that is being dealt with. But back to being on the ground, we work on right to counsel, we work with that type of thing. There's always conversations going on around that, even at this whole statewide level or at the federal level. The federal government today rolled out a blueprint for renters' Bill of Rights that includes funding for right to counsel programs nationwide, right? So we're looking at expansions of renters' rights all over the place, looking at increasing enforcement penalties for repairs here in New York City. And at the state level, there are all kinds of proposals related to tenants' rights that should be on your radar to look for what will be the next protections that are won by the tenant movement here in New York. So I will pass it on to the Community and Economic Development Department, but I'll still be around here for questions later.
All right. Thank you, Zach. And good evening, everyone. My name is Grzebyk, and I'm a staff attorney with the Community and Economic Development Team, also known as CED. The CED program provides transactional legal counsel to small businesses and nonprofits that sustain and empower low-income communities throughout New York City. Brooklyn A also works in partnership with the city's Department of Small Business Services to provide legal support through the Commercial Lease Assistance Program, which helps businesses in all 5 boroughs negotiate lease matters and rent arrears to stay open for their communities. Additionally, CED is looking to further expand its nonprofit work in the coming years, so please keep your eye out for further updates on that. COVID's impact on small businesses has been significant. Indeed, more than 26,000 businesses in New York City are estimated to have closed their doors between March 2020 and March 2022. 89% of those were small businesses with 10 employees or fewer. One national survey found that New York State had the most small business closures in the entire country. While the eviction moratorium also applied to commercial tenants, it expired in January of last year, and commercial tenants have been left without those protections that were previously afforded to them. The eviction moratorium allowed our clients to remain in their commercial spaces despite being behind on rent. Landlords' inability to evict our clients enabled our legal team greater leverage in waiving rent arrears and gaining other concessions like repayment plans, amending material lease terms, and landlords were more willing to undergo certain repairs and maintenance. Now, after the moratorium ended, however, we have landlords that are more likely to move quickly on eviction proceedings, landlords that are unwilling to negotiate fair terms for tenants, and ones that increasingly hold security deposits improperly. It appears that landlords are willing to forego unpaid rent to get tenants out quickly, believing they can find better commercial tenants. Despite the end of the moratorium on commercial evictions, the Commercial Lease Assistance Program still had plenty of success stories in the last fiscal year. Indeed, we provided over 1,800 unique services to 694 small businesses. Nonetheless, the challenges were undeniable. Many of our clients were forced to retain private litigation counsel to deal with their non-payment or holdover proceedings. Since Brooklyn A doesn't provide litigation services to commercial tenants and there's no public money available, those costs come directly out of business owners' pockets. Additionally, there's a legal requirement whereby corporate entities must be represented by legal counsel. And this puts a lot of our clients in a catch-22 where they can't afford counsel to defend themselves in these legal proceedings, but need to appear by counsel to avoid default judgments. Unfortunately, landlords know this all too well and take advantage of it. However, the CED team oftentimes works in tandem with our clients' retained litigation counsel. We are the ones that end up negotiating settlement terms and finalizing stipulations of settlement, with the retained counsel ultimately just signing off on these agreements, a strategy that ends up saving our clients money on attorney's fees. Another alternative to avoid litigation or to settle litigation quickly and avoid money judgments are vacate and surrender agreements, which have become more common in our work. Vacate and surrender agreements are preferable to evictions, but of course not ideal, since the tenant is ultimately left surrendering their commercial space despite it being in exchange for a full waiver of all rent arrears owed. For example, we had a client, Building Supplies Inc., which had 2 locations, one in the Bronx and one in Manhattan. Unfortunately, BSI was forced to close its Bronx location despite having 4 years remaining on its lease term and offering the landlord a repayment plan. We negotiated a vacate and surrender agreement, giving BSI enough time to close and remove its property from the premises, while also waiving all their rent arrears, which totaled no less than $690,000. While BSI was able to focus its efforts on its Manhattan location, most small businesses only have that one location. Now, turning to relief funds currently available to commercial tenants. There are a few interest-free loan programs available, such as the Hebrew Free Loan Society Small Business Loan, available to Manhattan-based businesses for up to $50,000. The Brooklyn Accelerate Low Fund in partnership with the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce for microloans of up to $15,000. And if you're a New York City-based business, the New York City Small Business Opportunity Fund is offering low-interest small business loans of up to $250,000 at 4% fixed interest rate with no minimum credit score required. It's easy to apply online and there's no application fee. However, many of our clients do not have the ability or are not in the financial position to take on more debt, and we tend to be hesitant in advocating for these loans, even if they are no interest. Recently, however, New York approved $672 million in aid for small businesses in the form of forgiving utility debts. Customers do not have to apply for the program. Utilities will identify those with eligible debts and apply the credit to their accounts. Lastly, repairs remain a battle for commercial tenants. Even before the pandemic, landlords would drag their feet and play a game of chicken when it came to repairs that were the landlord's responsibility. Tenants often end up paying out of pocket to keep business going, with the only way of recouping those costs requiring a lawsuit, an additional expense that landlords know tenants are unwilling to pay. In these cases, we first review the lease to ensure that the repair issue is indeed the landlord's responsibility and not the tenant's. If it is the landlord's responsibility, we check to see if there's a time frame on when and how fast the repair needs to be done. Then we advise the landlord of their contractual obligation concerning the repair. We advise our clients that they can verbally tell the landlord what is broken, but to always follow up in writing, either via text or email, in order to document what was discussed and agreed upon. If the landlord fails to make the repair, we notify them that the tenant intends to make the repairs itself and will forward the charges onto the landlord. If the landlord fails to respond to the bills, we notify the landlord that the tenant intends to withhold part of the rent to account for the repair expenses. This is a last resort, however, that holds potential risk for the tenant, since most commercial leases do not allow the tenant to offset or abate the rent for any reason whatsoever, even if the landlord is not complying with the terms of the lease. This would open a client up to the potential of being declared in default of the lease and the landlord commencing a non-payment or holdover proceeding. Ultimately, tenants should always document and keep records of the repairs and any communications had with the landlords regarding it. We do advise if the damage to the premises is structural or violates any codes or regulations that the tenant file a complaint either by calling 311 or the DOB and requesting that an inspection be done. If the city determines there's a violation, they may start fining the owner of the building until the issue is remedied. This oftentimes motivates landlords to perform the necessary repairs. Now I'll be turning it over to my colleague, Alex Knipenberg from the Consumer and Economic Advocacy Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you to all the previous presenters, and thank you to everyone who has joined our presentation today. My name is Alex Knipenberg. I'm a senior staff attorney here at Brook Legal Services Corporation A at the Consumer and Advocacy Program. Today we are talking about the expiration of the moratorium, and I will specifically focus on the expiration of the foreclosure moratorium, as well as providing some other mortgage-related updates and talking about what has been going on in the foreclosure world. I will also discuss some of the programs that are available to homeowners if they're behind on your mortgage or any other housing-related fees. So here at Brooklyn A, my work mostly consists of defending homeowners in foreclosure proceedings, and we also do some bankruptcy work. We defend homeowners in all stages of foreclosure, and we can assist you if you're in foreclosure even before your legal case commences. We represent homeowners in settlement conferences and further up in litigation. We also use our bankruptcy project to preserve homeownership if that is something that is available for you. Here at Brooklyn, we also have a lower income taxpayer clinic. So if you have a dispute with an IRS and your Department of Finance, we can help you solve it. And my colleague Serena will later talk more about it. So as mentioned, one of the goals of this presentation is to talk about what's been going on in the foreclosure since the moratorium ended in the January of 2022, a year ago. So initially, when the pandemic began, all the courts closed and existing foreclosure cases could not be moved and new foreclosure cases could not be commenced. As we are aware, the pandemic caused a lot of pain to our communities, and a lot of people in New York City were affected. Unemployment became high, people were sick and family members were affected. So a lot of people fell behind on their foreclosure payments. There were both federal and state moratoriums put in place that prevented new cases from beginning. So during COVID, you could not begin a new foreclosure case, and if you had an existing foreclosure case, it would just be paused until something would happen. During that time, however, New York City was among the places which had one of the highest mortgage defaults in the country. So although you could not file a new foreclosure case, a lot of people did fall behind on their payments, and it was expected that it's possible that we might have another foreclosure crisis because of everything else that was going on during COVID. That has not materialized yet, part and due because of the programs that both the state and the federal government put in place. So the number of new foreclosure cases has not skyrocketed yet as it was during the 2008 foreclosure crisis. However, the numbers are going up, and there are a lot of things that need to be done because there are more and more foreclosure cases being filed now, and homeowners do need further assistance. One of the reasons, however, the foreclosure crisis hasn't materialized yet is because of these programs. The Homeowner Assistance Fund was one of this program which came into effect right when the foreclosure moratorium expired. Unfortunately, this program is now closed. However, the program basically assists the homeowners if they were behind on their mortgage payments or any other housing related payments, and if they had a COVID related hardship, if they were affected by COVID in some way or another. Initially, half could give up to $50,000 for any housing expenses. Later, the award was increased to $95,000. And a lot of the applications are still being processed, and there's still a lot of applicants who applied for HAV who are still experiencing housing problems, and their applications are going through. Although the program is closed now, it is strongly encouraged that if there are any homeowners, they put themselves on a waiting list. It's pretty easy to do. You just go online and you have to put some of your information in. And then it's entirely possible that if there are any funds remaining, that the program will open again and you can apply for this. In terms of other programs available to homeowners, one is actually a one-shot deal, which is not widely known because lots of generally people think that one-shot deal is only available to tenants. However, one-shot deal is also available to homeowners. There's no strict, cap on how much you get, but it's below what you could get from HAV. So one-shot deal is another possibility. If your default is recent, it's possible to get some money out of it. And there's also something called IRMA, which is Equitable Retention Mortgage Assistance Program, which is only available to seniors right now. So if you're a senior and you're behind your mortgage payments, this is a loan that you can get. It's up to $25,000. It can cover reverse mortgage, regular mortgage, it can cover other housing expenses. This is an interest-free loan and you don't have to make any payments on it. The only way to repay it is either when the house is sold or when you decide to refinance. Otherwise, there's no interest accumulating on this loan and there are no regular monthly payments. We are monitoring if there are any other programs become available to homeowners. And as soon as we find out, obviously we would like to assist the best we can. Something I wanted to mention today and talk about is vulnerability to scammers. When homeowners are behind on their payments in foreclosure, they immediately become target to various scammers, and it's important to identify them. When you're in foreclosure, it's public record. So these people start looking up information about you, about your case. You might start receiving phone calls, letters, they knock on doors and go around. And when you don't know how the foreclosure process works, and in New York, foreclosure is a very long process. A lot of homeowners think they will lose their house immediately. They don't want to lose the house. And these people prey on vulnerable homeowners. And unfortunately, deed theft is one of the most common scams that goes on around New York City. Most commonly, they promise that those scammers promise that they will do a short sale or they will get you an amazing loan modification. You just have to sign a couple documents. And what ends up being is the homeowner transferred the deed of the property to those scammers. And then those scammers are able to take out more mortgages on the property. And all of a sudden, you don't own the property anymore. But in addition to the mortgage that you defaulted, you have even more mortgages on your property now. Another thing where homeowners fell vulnerable, loan modification and loan modification scams. So when you're in foreclosure, the most common way to resolve your case and settle your case is to apply for loan modification and keep your property. In New York, you're not allowed to charge services if you are applying for loan modification on homeowners' behalf. However, there are a lot of companies that do send out mailing, again, because this is public record. And homeowners think they know what they're doing, and they start paying for those services, even though in New York it's illegal to do. There are lots of legal service providers in New York available. They will do that for free. There are also lots of legal housing counselors, which are HUD-approved housing counselors, which are all free of charge, and they can do all their work. One other trend that we want to talk about today, which we've seen in foreclosures recently, is the 80-20 mortgages, which mostly stem from the 2008 foreclosure crisis. An 80-20 mortgage is basically like a piggyback loan that you use to buy the property when you don't want to make a down payment. So your first mortgage would be 80% and your second mortgage would be the down payment. A lot of the homeowners were targeted in mid 2000s, early 2000s, and in the late 2000s for a scheme like this, and fell vulnerable to either mortgage brokers or real estate. Those were mostly first-time home buyers who did not have experience in how to buy a home and what they're supposed to do. They relied entirely on their real estate broker to complete the entire transactions. And a lot of the times they were not aware that there's a second mortgage being taken out. We call them zombie mortgages because what has happened is most of the times the homeowners have kept current on their first mortgage. They've made all the payments on the first mortgage. But the second mortgage kind of disappeared and they haven't heard from them. There haven't been any payments for 10 or 15 years on the second mortgage. And all of a sudden, those second mortgages have started popping up now, and we see a lot of new foreclosures starting because a new foreclosure starting due to those mortgages, which were taking out on maybe '08 and maybe never any payments were made, or maybe payments were only made until 2010, and then they lay somewhere there, and then either some kind of a trust or an LC buys them up for a cents on the dollar and initiates new foreclosure action. There's a lot of issues regarding those mortgages, how they originated. There were a lot of unfair practices on how they originated, and now there's a lot of litigation going around those mortgages, and so we just want to identify this as one of the trends that we've been seeing recently. And last thing I wanted to talk about is what's been going on now. As we know, there has been inflation, and which has obviously affected everyone. But it has also affected the mortgage market because of the rising interest rates. As I mentioned before, the most common way for a homeowner to settle the case when they fall behind on mortgage payments is to apply for a loan modification. And basically you might have new terms, a new interest rate, a new maturity date, and a new payment. There's a lot of misconception that if you apply for loan modification, your payments will be lower. That might have been true during some time. It is mostly not true now, especially with the interest rates right now. Most likely, if you apply for loan modification now, your payments will increase a lot. And I just wanted to bring this up to people's attention. Because of how high the interest rates are now, you need to be aware that your payments might go up, and you need to be aware of your financial situation. We also wanted to mention that if you have a great interest rate, but you fell behind temporarily because you had a temporary hardship, bankruptcy might be another solution for you. Bankruptcy would allow you to keep your old interest rate through a repayment plan. So if you have on a 2 or 3% interest rate on your mortgage and you had a temporary hardship, that could be a good solution for you, because it'll allow you to keep your old interest rate, and it will save you a lot of money in the long term, as opposed to trying to get a loan modification and your new interest rate is going to be 7%. Thank you, everyone. At the end of the presentation, I think we'll be all available for questions, but at this time, I will pass to my colleague, Serena, who will talk about taxpayer issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. My name is Serena Sankofa, and I'm a program coordinator in the Consumer and Economic Advocacy program. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about, well, first, I'd also like to explain a little bit more about the Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic. As Alex mentioned, the Consumer and Economic Advocacy program does foreclosure and bankruptcy work. In addition to that, we also assist taxpayers. So the tax clinic in particular works to ensure the fairness and integrity of the tax system for taxpayers who are at a disadvantage and may not otherwise have the means to pay for representation. And we do that by assisting taxpayers to resolve various controversies. And we use a variety of transactional methods, including audit reconsiderations, office examinations, identity theft, credit recertification, and more, as well as representing taxpayers in U.S. tax court. And so that's the tax clinic, and I'll talk a little bit about what we've seen, the trends we've seen for the impact of COVID on taxpayers. So while there were moratoriums placed for foreclosure and eviction, there was no such pause in place with the IRS or New York State Department of Taxation with regards to collections and enforcement actions. So this is if somebody owed taxes or had some liability with either the IRS or New York State, there was no pause in place. Now, the primary reason for this is because there are already pathways built into both the IRS and New York State for taxpayers to resolve a tax liability. And so 3 of the primary resolutions that a client can pursue is an installment payment agreement. So making monthly regular payments to the IRS to resolve it. An offer in compromise. So an offer in compromise is an application that a taxpayer can submit to the IRS or New York State, basically offering a smaller amount based on their income, saying that I am not able to repay this amount within a given amount of time. And then there's also currently non-collectible status. So currently non-collectible status is also based on your income. You can apply and it usually lasts for up to a year. And if you're approved, that means that they will cease all collections and enforcement action during that time. So one of the things to note about each of these resolutions is that interest and penalties will still continue to accrue. So if you're in a payment agreement until that amount is paid in full, interest and penalties may continue to accrue, meaning your amount is going to continue to rise. If you submit an offer in compromise, interest and penalties will continue to accrue. And if that's rejected, that means during the process of trying to get that approved, the amount will have gone up. And the same with currently non-collectible status. And so that can be really scary for many clients, especially when they're trying to deal with things on their own. Which brings me to another issue that we saw during the pandemic, were really long wait times with the IRS and New York State. So typically it can already be about an hour trying to get in contact with somebody. And during the pandemic, especially during the beginning of it, it was usually a couple hours up to several hours a day. So for clients that already might have children to take care of, appointments to go to, a job, or just a life, it's really difficult and frustrating to have to sit and wait for hours. In many cases, they may get disconnected or be transferred to the wrong department and have to start over at the beginning. And then at the end, still not get the answers that they're looking for. And then another issue that's really not something new during the pandemic, but there are paid programs that essentially offer the same services as our tax clinics. And so these are legal programs, but essentially they'll do the same things that we do and often offer, charge people thousands of dollars. So we'll have clients that have come to us that are already very low income, but found one of these companies first and will agree to pay that amount because they think they're going to get a resolution. And it ends up often that they were only placed in currently non-collectible status, which is a very short and simple application, but we're charged thousands of dollars to do this from a company. And then another trend we saw during the pandemic is that there were more offers and compromise submitted, or there were more offers and compromise submitted and rejected. However, the individual offer amounts accepted increased. One of the main reasons that more offers and compromise were likely to be rejected is that the IRS and New York State are typically going to look at a 5-year time period to determine whether or not they can collect the money that you owe. And so for people that were unemployed, the IRS in New York State tends to look at this as you'll likely get another job at some point. And so those applications were more likely to be rejected. But it's great to see that individual offer amounts did increase. And then finally, there was some small amount of special pandemic relief through the IRS that was, put through by the federal government. And those were the economic impact payments or the stimulus payments. So these were issued as a form of pandemic relief. And these were 3 separate payments that were sent directly to taxpayers based on their 2018 or 2019 tax return. And so it automatically should have been sent to them. And for those that did not receive it, they could apply. But while, of course, they wanted this to be really efficient and did this through the IRS for that reason, of course, many issues arose. And that will lead us into the next slide, where I'm going to discuss special considerations for domestic violence survivors. So throughout the pandemic, Brooklyn A saw a huge rise in survivors among our clients. So for example, in the CEA program alone in 2019, we had 14 clients that identified as survivors. And now in 2022, in this past year, we had 77 clients that identified as survivors. Brooklyn A internally has instituted some new software and screening guidelines that have helped us track things better. However, this alone does not attribute to why there was such a huge rise. And from our program in particular, we were receiving many referrals directly from DV organizations. And if also just looked to things nationally, domestic violence rose during pandemic lockdowns. In a report from the National Commission on COVID-19 and Criminal Justice, they found that domestic violence incidents actually increased by 8.1% after the onset of the lockdowns in early 2020. This is not surprising. As I said, we were receiving many referrals from DV organizations, particularly organizations that were working with clients who were in DV shelters, and they were forced out of their homes by their abusers. So some of the main issues that we were working with DV survivors on, the first one is the economic impact payment. So as I mentioned, these payments were issued based on your 2018 or 2019 tax return. Unfortunately, in most cases, it was the abuser who filed, and the money would be issued directly to the abuser, and it was very rare that that money would ever make it to the victim, the survivor of domestic violence, and often in this case, the children, when they would be dispersed. Stimulus payments, the money never made it to the parent who's actually the primary one providing care. Another issue is fraudulent tax returns. So even in many cases, even after clients left the home and left their abuser, the abuser would still complete tax returns and sign for them. And so in that case, we had to file for identity theft. And then there are cases where a client might have signed a tax return, but they were doing so under duress. So in cases where they were concerned of being forced out of their home, they were concerned about retaliation against themselves or children, if there were children involved. And so even if a client did actually sign it themselves, this might have been due to signing it under duress. And then a key thing to note is that the economic impact payments, if you know somebody who has not received it yet, or believes that they received the wrong amount, they can come to the tax clinic, and you can still claim the stimulus payments up until the spring of 2024. So we have about a year left, until the filing season of next year. So that's also through the 2024 year. So we definitely want to make sure that we get that money to as many people as possible. And just a couple successes. In 2021, we were able to get $14,030 back in economic impact payments and give that to our clients. And in 2022, we were able to get back $31,345. And while all these clients were not domestic violence survivors, definitely a good percentage of them were. And that leads me into our closing note. We're very excited that we were able to launch a domestic violence program in the fall of 2022. The domestic violence program will offer services for individuals experiencing domestic violence, including orders of protection, child custody, child and spousal support, criminal court accompaniment, immigration matters, and more. And this program will be housed under the Consumer and Economic Advocacy program due to the large number of clients that we saw within that unit, as well as the ways in which consumer issues are very deeply interconnected with and exacerbate domestic violence. So if you are interested in connecting with that program, you can call our number, call Brooklyn A at the information listed on the slide. And I will hand it back to Will to close us out.
Thank you so much, Serena. Thank you to everybody presenting tonight. We'll get into the Q&A, but I'll just also put our contact information up here if anybody wants to reach out to us, if they are in need of services, if you're in need of services yourself, or if you want to connect someone else, please take down our info@bka.org email or our phone number here, 718-487-2300. And then we'll open it up to questions. I do want to quickly just note, I see that we have staffers from Representative Hakeem Jeffries' office and from State Senator Liz Kruger's office. So we're so happy that you could join us tonight. Thank you for being here. And I will now I'll close the share and we can open it up to questions. Like I said before, you can type your questions right into the Q&A bubble or the chat here. And then if you would like to ask a question verbally, you can raise your hand with the button that should be on your screen there. So just looking through our chat here, question from Tracy here. Did Governor Hochul sign any protections in December for homeowners?
Yeah, I can answer that.
Yeah, go for it.
So the only one that I'm aware of was the Foreclosure Prevention Abuse Act, but it only affects you if there's a statute of limitation issue on your mortgage. So if you had a previous foreclosure case, which was discontinued for one reason or another, and then a new foreclosure case was started, then it can affect you in a good way. Maybe the previous foreclosure can be, I mean, the loan maybe can be discharged due to the statute of limitations, but there are a lot of exceptions. That's the only, homeowner protection that was signed in December by the governor. There are no others that I'm aware of.
Thanks, Alex. All right, looks like we have a couple of hands raised. Let's see if we want to open up. Looks like Omar. Sarah, would you mind if you have the control of the buttons there? Oh yeah. Hey, Omar, go ahead.
Hi, good evening. Quick question. The landlord, he can evict me because I hold his rent for no repairs?
Sounds like a Zach question with PH. You said he can evict you if you're withholding rent waiting for repairs. That's the question?
Yeah, because he don't want to do no repairs at all. Signed last year, December 2022.
So, Omar, I'm really sorry to hear that you're facing those issues. Any specific situation that you're going through, I can't give you advice on that right now, but we can definitely talk offline, get some more information about it. In general, I can say that you can withhold your rent when they're not making repairs, and any eviction process has to go through court. So your landlord can't just change, and this is not just you, Omar, but anybody in New York, your landlord can't just change the locks or tell you gotta go. They've got to take you to court. And when you're in court for not paying your rent, which is a type of eviction, you can say, I'm holding the rent because the landlord won't make repairs. That's considered a defense to an eviction. And so in general, and I don't know about your specific situation, but in general, if you're holding your rent for repairs and you bring that up in court, that is a defense for an eviction. So, and I'm sorry to hear that it hasn't worked to get repairs. I also would advise, if you haven't, call 311. That's, it's just good. So that's another step that everyone should take. If you
One quick question.
Yeah.
And one more. Most of the person they came, they're supposed to be doing the repairs, the handyman, they send it. He said, they told me the landlord, he don't want to do the repairs to the Spanish people. Even to me, he don't want to do repairs in my apartment.
Oh, that's
I
horrible.
feel discriminated.
I'm really sorry about that. That's awful. That sounds like that would be, housing discrimination, very, very plain and simple. It's illegal in federal and state law and local law. I think, do we have a way of reaching out for anything so that we might be able to give some more detailed advice or something to Omar?
Yeah. Yes,
Yeah,
I used to have a case with you or with your office already.
Okay.
Because this landlord is for years and years.
Okay, so we will, if you want, you can, I don't know the best way to do this, you could put, so we could see if somebody can look up and see if we have contact information or reach out to.
Or, better yet, Omar, I'll put the our contact info again in the chat if you want to connect with us tomorrow. Unless Zach, you were looking for something specific.
No, that's all. And Christy's checking something. No, but yeah, if we put that, so Omar, if you're able to see the chat, we'll put the number, or if you already have our number from another time, call us so we can follow up. This is definitely something we would want to talk to you about. Yeah,
please, because it's already, I care about these things, because basically my ceiling from my daughter's room, it looked like it's gonna want to collapse. And I told them, right, I called 311 and I was on top of those things, but the guy, he don't want to do. I was running out with the stove and I brought one by myself from my money, but I take it out from his rent.
Mhm.
Even the fridge, he don't want to provide it to me. I brought one, but that was the next one. I will take it out from his rent.
So do you have, Omar, are you able to see the chat to see the number right now? Or if I say the number, can you write it down to give us a call?
Yeah, please give it to me.
Okay. So 718
Yes,
487
487
2300.
00.
So give us a
Okay.
call tomorrow. That'll go to our main line, and we'll connect you with an attorney to talk, because this is these are very, very serious issues that we want to take our time to talk about with you.
And
Yeah,
Mr.
please.
Mr. Oliva,
Yes.
when you call the main number tomorrow, please tell them that Zach and Christy told you to call.
Yes, yes.
All right.
So
Thank
they'll
you
get
so
you to the
much.
right people.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Christy. No, thank
Absolutely.
you. I really appreciate that.
Yes,
I
thank you.
trust you. I trust your office. That's why I'm waiting for this seminar you guys give me.
Well, we hope that we're able to continue to help, and again, I'm sorry that you're dealing with that. Thank you for bringing it up, and anyone else who may be listening who's dealing with similar issues, so that your rights. As I said, that you have to go through a court process. You can't be just automatically evicted. Holding back your rent for the purpose of getting repairs is a defense in a case like that. We of course advise people to hold on to the money, purposefully hold on to it, so that way the court can see that you're withholding it for repairs. And if you have any issues with discrimination, it's all too common, unfortunately. It's there are hotlines. Maybe I could put something in the chat as well, that people, you can call us at that number that's in the chat, and we can direct you. That's probably the easiest thing to do. We can direct you to other resources for discrimination.
Thank you, Zach.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, Omar, hope that can get resolved quickly. Now it looks like we have a question from Sabrina. I think we'll have her ask. Hey, Sabrina.
Hello. Hey, how you guys doing? Hi, how are you?
Doing good. Go ahead.
Good. I believe it's also for Zach. Just similar in regards to Omar. Omar, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with that as well. I've actually been displaced, my daughter and I, from our apartment for the past month, since the day after Christmas, because of a flood that happened in our building. We were actually on the news on the 2nd of January on Snyder, between Rogers and Nostrand. And as of now, every single tenant has had their apartment repaired and cleaned except mine. And it's discrimination. They've been retaliation from the landlord. They know that I've actually kind of mobilized the building when the situation first happened, the new situation, all of that. And my super actually admitted to me this morning that my landlord actually prevented the workers from actually getting into my apartment to finish the work today. So my daughter and I have literally been on credit doing this Airbnb hopping situation. And I just wanted to explain the information because I did want to definitely touch base with Zach tomorrow and just kind of give a little briefing of the situation. And I am definitely going to be hopefully pursuing litigation, but I just don't know the ins and outs in regards to that. But again, as of now, it's going to be a month tomorrow that we literally have not been able to go home. I'm an ERAP recipient. And literally the day that I let him know that I needed to apply for ERAP, the whole energy changed, and he has been treating me this way since last year. This management company and this landlord. So it's dire at this point, and I'm really been 311ing. I've had 42 cases opened and closed. Health department came through 3 weeks now, waiting for details on that, and it just feels like a lot of runaround, and I just don't know where the actual tenant protection is, and it's very frustrating and traumatizing at this point, especially for my daughter.
Well, and for you as well,
Yeah.
Sabrina. I mean, I cannot imagine. This is a horrible, tragic situation to be displaced like that, and I won't just pay lip service to it. It sounds like there's a lot of things that for you to discuss with me or another attorney, very specifically. So can you please, do you see that number as well?
I have it, absolutely. I will
Okay,
definitely
yeah,
give a call.
please.
Thank you.
Please reach out and there are a lot of potential issues. And our director of our unit is actually in the chat asking. So I'll talk to her more about this as well.
Fantastic. I thank you all so much. Thank you. God bless. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, so sorry to hear you're dealing with that. Hope we can.
If I can, so with both Omar and with Sabrina, we'll have we'll have our services right now, and we take a call in and we'll talk to you, and then we'll kind of assess the next steps, so we can't just, as a disclaimer, we can't promise, we're not giving advice right now, strict legal advice. We can't promise representation moving forward, but this is an ongoing conversation that we can continue to have with you to make sure that you're pointed in the right direction, whatever it may be that we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think from the written chat, it looks like we had a question from Lynette. Alex, did you answer that? Maybe you want to just answer it verbally here, just for other folks if they're interested.
Yeah, well, I mean, Lynette knows me and I know her, so it's a little easier. So, Lynette, you can just email me your half application number.
But just real quick, Alex, sorry, just for if anybody else is curious. So the question was that you applied for half on your own and got denied. Can you still apply?
Yeah, so can you email me your half application number? And if you have the denial letter, it usually comes by email. Email me that as well. I can see if I can reopen it for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex.
And again, if you're a homeowner in a similar situation, you can call our general number at 718-487-2300, and they'll direct you to our team.
Excellent. Thank you, Jesse. I know we're about 10 minutes after 7 here, but it looks like we have one or two more questions. We want to hear from George. We'll enter the chat. If you want to unmute George, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, good evening. I don't know how to start, but I'm a senior citizen. I inherited my family's 3-family home in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. And I've been a homeless and housing activist since late 70s with Jane Wood and Jane Benedict, going up to Albany protesting for tenant rights. But since I inherited my family's property, I've wanted to make housing available, especially for homeless people who are in between housing and Section 8. And during the pandemic, I took in 6 homeless people on and off of 3 years. It's been disastrous. I've been threatened and bullied and been pushed. I'm on the verge of suicide because the police said this is a tenant landlord matter. The thing is, I'm being threatened every other day or every other week, and I have it all on, most of it on videotape and audio tape. And there's no senior rights. I've called at least 18 different senior and help services organizations, and there's no one to really give me any help unless I'm domestic violence survivor. But no, I mean, it's a 3-family, it's a private home pretty much with 3 families. I'm on the first floor, and I'm constantly being intimidated, being talked down to, yelled at. 2 of these are deadbeat fathers. I decided to help them because the Subway's closed down, and Burger King and McDonald's and Wendy's closed at the same time in March 2020. So I took them in. I had 2 empty apartments. I'm the only, the other 2 apartments are 6 rooms, 3 bedrooms. So I decided to do the right thing. It's been intimidating. Thing is, I went to my councilman's office, Justin Brandon. I thought a Democrat would have more heart. No, I think they look down at you because I've been foolish enough to take these people in and being abused and taken advantage of. And there's no rights for senior citizens. Whether you're a landlord or not, the police don't really give you any help at all. The thing is, how long before I snap?
to get some help because I just don't know where to go. I've called Brooklyn on Skimmer, what do they call it? Montague, no, Remsen Street, the Brooklyn law office. They give you a litany of options of automated services that pretty much it's a business to hire lawyers to help you. Here I'm running a charity for the past 8 years. I haven't seen any black. I haven't been in the black for like 8 years. So I don't know where to go. I mean, going to housing court.
Mr. Plagianos?
How do I get help?
Yes.
I don't want to
Hi,
commit suicide because I'm stressed out.
So, Mr. Plagianos, I'm so sorry that you're going through all this stress, and it sounds like a really serious situation.
You want to help people, and you've been taken advantage of.
Sir, do you have access to email or phone?
Oh yeah, I do. I can give it to you now.
Well, if you could email us, can you write down this email address?
Oh, let me get a working pen. A pencil's much better. Thank you. I'm listening.
Okay,
What's your name,
email
ma'am?
us. My name is Jessie Rose, R-O-S-E.
Okay.
And you can email us tonight or tomorrow morning.
Yes.
At info, I-N-F-O, at bka.org. And give us your B as in boy or Brooklyn, ka.org.
Oh, say that again. BKA?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
.org.
I'm a little dyslexic. I'm sorry.
That's okay. B as in
.org.
boy, K as in kite, A as in Albert.
Albert, okay.
.org.
Yes. And
And just put your name, phone number, and email, and just say this is for Jessie, and I will get back to you tomorrow morning, and we can talk some more. We'll try to get you some help.
Whenever's available. Thank you.
Sure thing. Thank you for raising your concerns, and we'll see if we can help.
I wanted to do the right thing, and I'm not strong enough person. I'm a little guy of 5'4", and other people are much bigger than me, so it's easy to be bullied.
It sounds like a very difficult situation, and Sarah and our team did put in the chat that the suicide crisis lifeline is 988.
Oh, I spoken to them. Yeah.
Okay.
I went to Lutheran Hospital like three times the past 2 years because I've been stressed out by all these issues.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure thing.
Best of luck to you, George. So sorry you're dealing with obviously a really terrible situation. Yeah, make sure we get in contact with us. We'll absolutely help you out. I think we're pretty closed. We'll have one last question here. We'll answer just for the group. The name is cut off, apologies, but the question is how to apply for Equitable Retention Mortgage Assistance Program. Question for Alex K.
Yeah, so you have to apply online. You have to prepare basically a whole application. I put in the chat to just send me an email so I can provide the exact instructions on how to apply. But basically you need to put a financial packet together, and then it's submitted online, and usually within a month you'll hear back whether you qualify or not.
Perfect. Thank you, Alex. Unless we've got not seeing any additional questions in our chats. Of course, as we said, our contact information again is the best way to reach us is info@bka.org or by phone at 718-487-2300, 2300. So we are open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. Please do reach out to us if you're in need of services. We have a lot of referral partners. If it's not work we necessarily do, we know a lot of people in the community who can help, and we can get you to someone who can help you. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for your questions, and thank you again to all of our speakers. Everybody had so many incredible things to share, and I think this is really valuable. And thank you for fielding everyone's questions. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up, and thank you again, and have a great night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.